Hey, bow hunters, and welcome. This episode is brought to you by Raw World Company. If you have not already, or if you guys have the access to your own coffee machine at home, like a pod machine, or you can grind up coffee and make your own coffee, even if you've got like a little filter, I would highly, highly recommend using these guys' coffee. It's absolutely delicious. It's straight from Papua New Guinea, and they make it, they roast it over here in Australia, and it is freaking delicious. But you can get 15% off with the code, all in capitals, BABH. That's on their coffee as well as their biltong and stockies. So if you're anything like me and you love biltong but you don't have time, or you haven't made the time to make your own biltong, then these guys have incredible stuff. It's all made within Australia. It's grass-fed, it's soy-free, it's gluten-free. It's high in protein, obviously, being that it's grass-fed beef, and it's really top-quality beef as well, being that it's grass-fed beef. They've got a range of different flavors from chipotle, peri-peri, hot chili, original, and teriyaki. I actually like them all. The hot chili isn't ridiculously hot, but I think they're just a great snack. I use them whenever I go traveling. I'm in Sydney this weekend, and I'm going to take a heap of them with me. It's just like my snack for while I'm on the road. But I really like them when I'm out in the field as well. So when I'm going hunting, it's a great snack for pretty much any occasion for wherever you are. So if you have not already, go across, check out their websites, rawworldcompany.com.au. They have some incredible products there, and you guys can get 15% off with the code BABH. Hey there, and welcome to Becoming a Bow Hunter. I'm your host, Maddie. And join me and our guests as we take the quality of meat back into our own hands, searching the wild for free-ranged animals to harvest as ethically as we can. I interview a variety of specialists from the bow hunting community to help fast-track your journey as a bow hunter. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this chinwag on one of your favorite topics in the world: bow hunting. All right, welcome everybody, and welcome Dr. Anthony J. Thank you for joining me, sir.
Oh, thanks for having me. First hunting podcast I've ever done.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of exciting.
Awesome.
Like we got talking on my other podcast that we interviewed you on, health and fitness podcast, and to get onto the topic of hunting at the end of it, I was kind of like, why would we not take this opportunity to sit down and chat hunting for a little bit?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm excited.
Yeah. So how did you get into archery yourself?
Yeah, it's a good question because my parents never hunted. My mom, in fact, is afraid of guns.
Yeah. Okay.
And for a valid reason, actually. I guess one of her cousins or somebody she was real close to accidentally shot himself as a child.
Yeah.
And it had like a massive impact on my mother. And so she just absolutely hated guns.
With a hand pistol or a rifle?
I'm not sure. I don't really know the details. I haven't really pressed for the details, but I think she was even there. Her and her sister were there at the time, so it made a massive impact. So she wouldn't even let me have a bow and arrow until I was about 12 years old.
Yeah,
and then I started shooting, target shooting. At 12, I finally got a bow and arrow. My brother also. And he got really into archery tournaments, and I started doing tournament shooting.
Yep.
And here in Minnesota, the state of Minnesota, which is in the middle of the United States, middle north, everybody hunts.
Okay.
like not super serious, but there's a kind of a hunting culture. The state of Minnesota is known for outdoor culture. And so the people that shoot archery, they're usually just shooting archery to try and get practice, get sharp for hunting. Mm-hmm. And so if you become a target shooter, you just meet people that are, interested in hunting, that hunt, and then can teach you about hunting. So I just kind of started to learn about it from these other people and got interested in myself and started hunting small things like rabbits and kind of worked up from there.
Yeah, that's unreal.
And as a side note, my brother Nick, he became the Minnesota State archery champion. So he was actually invited on the United States Olympic team to shoot archery.
Did you go
so in the Olympics,
it?
they have. No, he decided to go to college instead. He would have had to he would have had to drop out of college, basically.
Yeah.
But he had a connection that, this coach that had all the connections and everything lined up because my brother is so phenomenal. And by the way, my brother still never shot an animal.
Oh, wow.
He's tried. He's been hunting a lot of times. So there's such a difference, right? I mean, I've taken him deer hunting. He's had opportunities. He tries to get his bow back. Deer sees him. Deer spooks,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's from what I've done so far, the stalking for me has been the hardest part because I usually get winded. Like the wind, wherever I've been, it swells a lot, and it's really, really quite frustrating because you get, like, I was 20 meters on an absolute stud the other day, and the wind swelled on me, and I was just like, what the hell? But I mean, it just makes you more hungry to keep doing it. Really, for me, that's the way I feel. So with the 3D archery, how does that work when you go into tournament side of things?
So for other tournaments I've shot and the one my brother has shot, we were just shooting at a 5-spot target. Yep. So there's literally just 5 circles. You shoot 5 arrows, and then you walk up and pick them up, and then you go shoot another 5, and you shoot a total of 60 shots. Mm-hmm. And then there's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is the score.
Yep.
And then usually these guys just shoot 5s, and then you're counting X's. You're counting how many. It's like the size of a quarter. Mm-hmm. And my brother, with his fingers, he can shoot 60 shots from 20 meters into a quarter.
Far out.
And for you, I don't know what your monetary. You probably have different money, right? But
yeah, so I mean,
just like a metal coin.
10-cent coin, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so like for me, I'm not that great, but I can still shoot. I can shoot the bullseye, but obviously when you're hunting, there's such a different dynamic in terms of your nerves.
Yeah.
And that was the real challenge for me initially, is just learning how to control your nerves, because you always get nervous. Even when you're experienced, it still comes on, and that's part of the fun. But managing the nerves is a learned skill set.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that we teach people within like our nutrition coaching company that I do on the side. Like that's something that we really help people with, is trying to dial in their breath work to be able to calm them down. But I got into the stage where I was head to head with a stag, and in that that's something I've never had before, and it was intense. Like it was super intense. My adrenaline was pumping through through the roof, really, and I was just trying to breathe as calm as I could. And even then, I just couldn't regulate myself. Like it was probably one of the most intense moments I've had in my life. Like it was insane.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because the more you do it, the better you get. So when I was a teenager, so I started homeschooling. So my parents started my whole family homeschooling, and it's fairly common now in the United States. Back then, it wasn't as common, but they did it for religious reasons, for academic freedom, so we can study whatever we wanted, whatever we were interested in. I have a brother who's just exceptional at math, for example. And so when he was like 16 years old, he was taking calculus in college, in my local college.
No way.
And doing better than most of the 20-year-olds there and things like that.
Yeah.
So, we were able to pursue academic things. But for me, I was able to go hunting every day.
Oh, that's unreal.
So literally I would wake up at like 5:30 a.m., go out hunting, and get back, by like 9.
How old
I could
were
walk. I started hunting when I was 13.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe even 12. I mean, I started pretty quick. I realized real quickly I don't really like shooting at targets that much. I like hunting, right? Like it's okay. But once I learned about hunting, shooting at targets isn't really the end game for me.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think like what you said before, the 3D archery, it was kind of brought in as a supplement, right? Because your hunting seasons are only so long within Minnesota, within America. I
mean, archery here, we have 3 months.
Yeah.
From about September 15 to January 1st or December 15. Whereas with gun season in Minnesota, you only have 4 days.
What? That's insane.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to be a gun hunter here, most people aren't as enthusiastic. They literally used to give school off for gun hunting season because so many people would do it. It's just everybody's out there. Everybody's wearing blaze orange. Everybody just blitzes the woods for gun season. But for archery, it's quiet. You're out there by yourself. You don't see any other people. And, you got all this time. You make mistakes. You learn. You got 3 months to figure it out. And then the snow, too. The snow is an interesting dynamic, right? It completely changes what the animals are doing.
It's quite hard to trek through snow too, right? Like it just adds an extra
sometimes
dynamic to get through some thick snow. But I guess they're not going that deep, are
they? The deer usually herd up in the winter, and that's the most interesting aspect. Like here in Minnesota, they'll get out of the, if the snow is too deep, they'll migrate to an area where it's less deep.
Yeah.
But it's cool because if you can find the food source, you'll, in the fall, they're super sensitive because they can smell you better.
Yeah.
The hotter it is, the more molecules move. So when it's cooler, the deer actually can't smell you as good, especially when it's really cold, like it gets here. And so I literally will hunt in minus 20 degree weather. Because if you find a food plot, right, like if you find some standing corn or somewhere where the deer are, they're desperately hungry. So they're coming out there and they're just putting their head down and they're just walking out to the food.
Yeah.
Whereas early season, they're looking around, they take a step, they take a few more steps, they look, they sniff,
Yeah, definitely.
It's a different kind of hunt.
And so for you, are you mainly hunting public lands then, or is it private or a mix?
Both. Yeah.
Because for food lots to be there, that would be a private land section, right?
No, and here in Minnesota, they actually they plant different foods just for the wildlife, 100%, cool. And they leave it standing. Let me plug my computer in. I just realized my computer's not plugged in because my wife pulled the extension cord.
No dramas. Go for it.
Sorry. Hey, Maddie, sorry about that.
That's all good. So you started with like a recurve or a longbow?
No, I started with compound, just fingers and the compound. And I've always wanted to do a recurve, but I've never had the time. The guys that are really good at it, they do it every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, it's just one of those feel things. You got to keep it up, I think.
Yeah, I started off with a recurve and just even shooting just in my garage, like I got the hang of it pretty quick, but I felt like if you ever had a few days of no practicing, it was really quite harsh in regards to your accuracy. But also I went out hunting and just even hunting rabbits, I was getting a few, but it just wasn't as accurate as what it probably should be for an ethical kill. So for me, it was a big decider. Is like if I'm going to be successful with hunting deer, I thought at that time like. I don't see myself getting 5 meters from a deer to have a really, really clean shot. So I transitioned to the compound pretty quick. But, I mean, I still get the recurve out every once in a while. It's fun to have there.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to the day when I have enough time to shoot every day and really get into that. But I don't know. Have you seen this video of the guy who shoots? He fires off these arrows, like boom, 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 boom. He shoots real fast.
No.
He uses like a left-handed bow, but he holds it with his right hand.
Yeah.
And he shoots this weird style where he can hold arrows in his hand and fire them at the same time. It's like but it's with a recurve. It's a totally non-traditional way of shooting.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the guy's name. On YouTube, it's got like millions of views because it's so unique.
It might be the same guy that like he throws plates in the air and he'll shoot at the plates and
It might be.
He'll throw like 2 plates and he'll rebound it off of one to hit the other and stuff. Like he's crazy.
Oh wow. Yeah, these trick shooters.
yeah, it's absolutely insane. Like I think some people are hard enough just hitting at the target, right? Let alone doing the rest of it. Yeah.
Well, in the Olympics, they're shooting across a football field, at least an American football field's 100 meters. And of course nowadays the compounds do pretty good with that, but they're shooting recurves.
Yeah, it's absolutely
and
insane.
Fingers. And so there's a different level with fingers.
In the Olympics, they would give them distance, right? Like they'd know it in advance.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Whereas I think in some 3D archery targets, they don't. Like in some of the shootouts,
Correct.
It's just like you have to kind of, I guess, picture what you think it would be.
Right. Yeah, that's a challenge. I mean, especially these days when you've got rangefinder. So do you use a rangefinder, I assume?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just an extra handicap you're giving yourself.
You can do that when you're in these archery tournaments?
I don't think so. No, not
I didn't think
3D
so either.
tournaments.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, when I'm getting out hunting, something I only just learned recently was to obviously, when you pull up Pew, when you finally stop, is to check a few things around you, like get a few points around you to kind of see what the range is around you. Because the first time I was kind of just tripping all over everything and ended up scaring the animal off because I was trying to figure out how far they were, and they saw me moving. I'm like, God damn it.
Yeah. And do you have a lot of local like buddies and things that hunt over there? I mean, it's such a different culture
than
really
over
is.
Here. And so to be honest, I'm very, very fresh to archery, like within the last year, and I don't have any friends here within Brisbane that do archery. I've got some down south that are about 12 hours away. That kind of
12 hours?
Yeah, kind of got me into it. So I haven't caught up and gone hunting with them or anything like that. But I mean, it seems like it's a pretty good community that, like I'm meeting up with some guys next week, so I'm pretty stoked for that, like some local Brisbane kids as well. So that would be good.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, my family owns some property here in Queensland where I live, so I can go there. It's maybe like a 2.5 hour, 3 hour drive that I can go on. It's private property hunting. In Queensland,
Nice.
it's really quite bizarre. We don't have, you can't hunt public land. And they've got, like, each state is individual in how they kind of see the hunting side of things. And there's a petition going at the moment to see if enough people like it, or if enough people sign it, they're going to take it to I guess, council. But I don't know if it's really that worthwhile for them to actually put it up, like, monetarily. I just don't know if it's really going to be that worthwhile for them. Like, I'm sure there's lots of hunters that would come out of the woodworks and happily pay for a tag system or whatever it is to go into the public land. But yeah, I'm just not sure how it's going to work.
That's what we do here.
Yeah, like how does it work in Minnesota for you guys? Do you pay per animal that you go for? Or you pay just for a hunting season? How does it actually lay out?
Yeah, you pay per species. So this year I did duck hunting.
Mm-hmm.
I did pheasant hunting. No, with a gun, shotgun.
Yeah.
I did pheasants. I did, let's see, of course I did fishing and some other stuff, but I mean, I paid hundreds of dollars in license fees because I spent, I did deer. What else did I do? I did some other, I can't even remember all the different, small game. So if I see a coyote, I can shoot it. That's like a $12 license.
Okay. So
for deer, it's like
$20 of them in your pocket.
Yeah, I carry a big stack of them, and they're on my phone too, so they're digital. But for deer, you need a physical tag after you shoot a deer. Mm-hmm. But the public land here in Minnesota is everywhere. I mean, just phenomenal. There's an app, and I use, and you look up public land areas, and I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of acres, unlimited almost.
That's unreal.
If you drive around a little bit, and most of it is wetlands, so people they're not able to build houses because it's too swampy.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's, good rivers and that are running through it. So yeah, you shoot a deer and then you tag it, and then, you can actually buy other additional tags for does. Mm-hmm. So you can shoot a buck with the antlers, and then you can shoot additional does for like half price, usually like $10, which is really cheap.
That's so insane. Yeah.
Because like buying a whole cow is like $2,000.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
So you can get a deer for about $20. So even just for the meat perspective, because I've got 4 kids, right? I went out and shot 3 deer this year, and I did 3 last year. Also, I was trying to get 5 this year though, because last year I shot 3, and then before springtime, I had already eaten all 3 of those completely. So this year I set my mind to do 5, but I had some difficulties. So I'm at the Mayo Clinic here in Minnesota, and I'm friends with these 2 Chinese doctors. One of them is a woman, one's a guy. They're both medical doctors. One's an MD and one's an MD PhD.
Yep.
And of course, it's illegal to hunt in China, and it's illegal to have guns in China, all this. So I took them out hunting, and it was literally probably about 5 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
So that's probably like minus 10 in Celsius at least.
Yeah.
And it was windy as heck. And we saw a doe in this tall grass area, and it bedded down. We watched it bed down. So I snuck up to it, literally about 10 meters.
Yeah.
And I started to pull my bow back, but the release, I'm using a release now because I used to shoot fingers, but now I don't have time to practice as much. So I use a release mechanism. The release had frozen solid with all the driving snow that was getting pushed into it. and I couldn't get it closed onto the bowstring. So I'm 10 steps away from this deer that's sitting there. And I'm like struggling to try and get the release clipped onto the string. And of course I can't use my fingers because I have the whole bow set up for the release, right?
Yeah.
So I have the sight set up. I've got a special arrow rest that's designed for release.
Yeah.
This whole thing. So I literally had to crawl back to my Chinese buddy and ask him to like open the release up for me with his like, take his hands out of his mittens and all. So he gets it clipped on. The whole thing is taking a long time. And I start to pull my bow back, and the release pops open on its own, and the arrow just weakly flies out, lands right next to the deer, just on the ground, just sticking up.
And of course, scares the deer away.
Just took off. Right.
No.
So he didn't. And we had hunted hard for like 2 or 3 days. He's run 10 marathons, he said. Marathon being, 26 miles or whatever, and I don't know how many kilometers.
42 kilometers.
Yeah, and he's run 10 of those, and he said hunting with me is literally the equivalent of running a marathon. That's what he told me. And I believe it because we were hunting hard. I mean, we were pushing, and we're in the grasslands of Minnesota out west where it's just prairies and flat country, just wide open. So you just walk all day.
Yeah. Okay. And so what's your kind of, I guess, like, what's your scheme when you go out? What are you planning? Are you trying to get up ridges so you can look down and kind of glass an area, or is no real spots
my favorite
like that?
No, my favorite is, so again, we have public land and they put these cornfields out just for wildlife.
Yeah.
And there's so many of them, it spreads the hunters out, right? Like if there was only one, everybody would hunt it, but they're everywhere. So what I do, my favorite thing, I have this camouflage that's corn colored. It looks like a cornfield. And I wait till the corn is kind of dry and I wait for a windy day. So if it's a calm day, they hear you coming through the corn stalks because the corn is so dry and crunchy. But if it's windy, the corn rustles.
Anyway,
and I literally will just go row, like from row to row, and look down the row, and walk to the next row, look down the row, and just zigzag through the cornfield, like in a certain pattern, like I'm looking for a dead body or something. I just basically, walk up 20 yards, cut across the whole field, walk up 50 yards, cut across the field, walk up 50 yards, cut across the field. You know what I mean? Like that sort of pattern. Maybe 20 to 50 yards, depending on how far you can see down the rows. Usually you can see about 100 yards, I would say. But anyways, eventually you bump into it. You see a deer down there just eating or walking along, and it's game over.
That's unreal. Yeah, that's really cool.
It's really fun. It's better than tree stand because it's more intense,
And so what sort of deer is that? Is that the whitetail or?
Correct. Yeah, they're all whitetail here.
What's the deal? Why do people do, for instance, like a tree stand compared to just getting out and spotting and stalking?
That's easier. Most people, I mean, it's night and day difference. It's super hard to stalk them around here because they get hunted so much.
Okay, so they super jumpy deer just in general?
Yeah, unless you're on private land. If you're on private land, it's almost a different species, it feels like. Mm-hmm. Because the public land deer get pressured.
I've never sat in a tree stand, but I don't know.
It's fun. It's fun. Okay. It's fun.
Because you hear people doing it for like 13 hours on end. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, that takes some fun. I did that one time. So I've shot a few different black bears over the years, right?
Yeah.
And one of them was with my wife, actually, in New Hampshire. There's an area in New Hampshire, which is on the East Coast by Boston. They have 1 bear per square mile. In this area, which is way overpopulated for bears, right? So if you put out bait, which you're allowed to do for bears because they're nocturnal, I mean, you just get hordes of them coming in.
Yeah, okay.
But, so I've shot a few bears, but one of the times, you put the bait out in the morning. You go and check the baits, right? Like I had a guide, he did all the baiting. So I had 100 different bait stations. And part of the fun of bear hunting is you check the baits, right? And you see how destroyed all these baits are.
Yeah.
But we had this one giant bear, like 900-pound black bear, potentially a Minnesota state record bear.
Far out.
And of course they have cameras and all this, so they have a pretty good idea. And it was coming in every day. And I passed up like a 300-pound bear in a different tree stand, which is a really respectable black bear.
Yeah.
And then the guide was like, "Okay, you want to get a big one? I'm gonna put you on this 900, right?" And so I sat in the tree, and of course it didn't come in. I sat in the tree again that evening, and it didn't come in. And I figured maybe it's so smart right? Like it's used to people putting baits out in the morning because that's when the guides always come, right? I thought maybe if I go in there in the morning and just sit all day long until the evening, maybe it'll come in, right? Because what they usually do is you go put the baits out in the morning.
Yeah.
And then you go back home, and then like around 3 p.m. in the afternoon, you go back out and you go into the tree stand.
Uh-huh.
Right. But that night, so I sat all day long, still didn't come in. So sometimes these, and you know, as soon as you get out of the stand and you're not there, you watch the trail camera. Yeah. And it comes in, you know, it comes in during shooting hours. They're smart. Like I feel like some of these big smart ones, they've got a special nose or they're circling around and they probably even have better vision. You know, bears are notoriously bad vision.
Yeah.
They have just terrible vision, but maybe some of these older ones are bigger and older because they have better vision on average.
And so of a 300-pound bear, how much once you've boned it out and got rid of the hide and skull, how much are you actually getting weight-wise in meat?
I don't know. Maybe not that much, right? Like maybe 100 pounds. I don't know.
Okay.
They don't have a lot of guts, right? Like they don't, like the deer have a lot more guts.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. I've never weighed it, and I don't like bear meat as much as the average person. So I usually give a lot of it away to people that really like it. Mm-hmm. I don't hunt them that much.
No.
But
like, are you prepping sausages and stuff with it, or are you just having it just as is, like making roast and whatever else out of it?
Yeah, I cook it as is. It tastes okay. The problem with bear is you have to cook it really well.
Yeah.
So you have to make it well done because of trichinosis and parasites. So I don't like it for that reason as much. I like to cook my meat a little lighter.
Yeah.
But it's more for the rush, right? Like I really like to hunt an animal that will stalk you. And I don't know, did I tell you I've done bear trapping as well?
No.
Yeah. So in the United States, bear trapping is illegal in all of the states except one. And so I went to that one state, it's Maine, in the state of Maine. And, and I hired a guide because, they have to bait and they have to find the bears and all this. And I tried trapping for a whole week, and I've got footage of this bear walking around my trap, all this stuff. We're like spraying it with the scent-free stuff.
Yeah,
like it's just evading this trap, and that you use these special traps, so it looks like this intimidating bear trap. It's this big giant metal trap, but it actually in the jaws you have this cable woven in. And it's literally just a cable throwing machine. So you put you can put your hand in it, and it looks really scary, right? Like I did this on video with the guide and these other guys around at camp.
Yeah.
And they're all like, "Oh shit, don't put your hand in there." and I just put it right on my hand and just fired the bear trap on my arm. Because it doesn't hurt,
so
right?
It
looks like it, but
it throws it in the lock system.
But it throws the cable up. Yeah, and it has a spring on the cable and a one-way sliding lock that slides down and locks it tight.
Yep.
And it only slides down a certain extent, right? Like it can't get too small because otherwise you'll catch deer. Mm. So there's actually a little safety stop that gets crimped onto the cable near the end. But anyways, right? Like, yeah, it's just a cable. It's just basically a noose, right?
Yeah.
So it throws this cable noose. And so like the metal part is kind of weak and soft, but it looks really frightening.
Yeah.
But the problem with bears, like my guide told me, you can teach a bear to ride a bicycle, right? Like they're actually intelligent animals. Like you never could teach a deer to ride a bike. They're just stupid,
exactly.
right? But these bears are smart enough to kind of figure, and where it's legal to trap them, I mean, they're unbelievably intelligent compared to normal, like other places, because they've been trapped. So I tried for a whole week. Literally, the bear came in pretty much every day and did not get caught.
Far out.
And then I hired a different guide and tried again for another week. And that was interesting actually, because this other guide, I was telling him about my book and about estrogen chemicals, relating to our other podcast. And he's like, "Oh, it's funny that you say this because, in Maine, in the state of Maine, they have these red hot dogs. I don't know if you guys, what hot dogs are, like sausages.
Yeah.
Like, maybe have a different name for them in Australia.
You know what we call the small ones, like it's usually a Frankfurt, right? Like a long one.
Yeah.
We call the small ones Cheerios. And Stacey, my wife, she's from England, and she's like, Cheerio, what the fuck? Like that's the name of a cereal. I'm like, no, that's the Cheerios are the little red sausages.
Well, in Maine, in the state of Maine, they dye them bright red.
Yeah,
like really bright. And it's, of course, artificial red food dye, which is, of course, an estrogen chemical.
Yeah.
Which I tell people to avoid. And so while as I was riding around in the guy's truck, we were talking about artificial estrogen. I told him about red dye. And he's like, oh, it's amazing because he uses meat as part of his bait in the late season. Mm-hmm. And, of course, in Maine, one of the expired meats he gets from grocery stores is those red hot dogs.
Yeah.
So he'll have all these foods in there, right? Expired. But he said the black bears will eat everything, but they'll pick out those red hot dogs and push them aside.
No way, smart creatures.
And he said even if you have regular hot dogs in there, mixed in there, they'll eat those, but they'll push the red ones out, and they taste the same to me, right?
Isn't that bizarre? But yet humans will
still
go for gold on them.
Yeah, they're smart enough to know it's that estrogen. They don't want to become infertile, eating red hot dogs.
You know what? Those traps sound so nice. Like I've gone out with my cousin who owns some property in the middle of Queensland. We've gone out and just put some dog traps down, and it's literally just like bare teeth, and it just shuts on their ankle or whatever steps in the position. So that sounds really quite nice in comparison to those traps.
Yeah. You can get rubber jaw traps too, for like foxes or coyotes. What kind of dogs? Like wild dogs?
Yeah, so like dingoes, and then dingoes breed. There's a common thought within Australia on the mainland that there's no longer actually purebred dingoes anymore, but I'd swear they're still out there. Like they definitely mix with local dogs, but I would say there's definitely still some purebred dingoes out there. Like I came across one the other day it was pretty much all black, and it just had full red strip through the middle of it.
Cool.
Yeah, they're really quite cool to see in the wild, and it looks kind of like, do you know what a Kelpie is?
No.
It's just a breed of dog, so it's kind of like a cattle dog. So they kind of look similar to that. Like I guess that's what they're commonly breeding with, is just people.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen dingoes. I've seen dingoes.
Yeah. So I guess it looks very similar to a dingo, just with a bit of color to it.
Well, I've tried my trap. I tried my bear trap with hogs down in Florida.
Yeah.
I just took the little safety stop off so it could close down tight.
Okay. Yeah.
In Florida, they pretty much let you use anything, right? Like they if you had dynamite on a timer, they would be okay. Like they don't care because there's so many hogs and they're taking over everything.
Yeah.
In fact, maybe about a month from now, actually, about 3 weeks from now, I'm going to Texas with a bunch of guys, and we're going to do some hog hunting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've tried the trap for the hogs, but I never managed to catch one. But my buddy, I didn't have a lot of time on that particular trip.
Uh-huh.
But my buddy, he's got a cage trap. It's like a pen where the wild hogs walk into, and then they trip a trigger at some point, and then you catch a whole herd of them.
Yeah. So
he's basically got free meat, unlimited.
That's unreal. We use them here in Australia too. My auntie actually had a pig infestation, and it started off like maybe there was 5 to 6 pigs around, and within probably 3 months they had 40 to 50 pigs just constantly hitting there. So they've got cattle, and they feed their cattle grain and grass, and they would feed them their little grain lots. They'd chuck some grain in it, and these pigs were coming up every day, and they'd push the cattle off of the grain and eat the grain themselves, and then they'd bail out. So they're pretty smart creatures. So they end up putting up a whole heap of grain and put the cage up, the pen up, and they got probably like 15 in one hit, I think.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's
really
good.
Cool.
Yeah,
but everyone, I don't know, depending on who you talk to, but here in Australia, they're pretty scared of eating pigs.
Really?
Yeah, because of the disease. So I think it's
parasites.
Yeah, exactly. And I think trichinosis is something that we get. It might, if not that, it's something similar that we get in the pigs, and so people are pretty scared towards it. And I think, I don't know, depending on who you ask, they'll check the liver, and if it's good quality liver, like there's apparently no harm in doing it as long as you're cooking it right, just like the bears. So it's Yeah. If it's got spots on it, then obviously keep away from it.
I've done moose hunting too, and I've shot a couple moose over the years.
Yeah, with the bow or with the gun?
With the bow, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Almost all my hunting I do is with a bow if I can help it, right? Like big game hunting I do with bow.
Yeah.
And moose, they sometimes get this thing called a heartworm, it's some kind of a roundworm or a pinworm or something that bores through your heart.
Yeah.
Which sounds like the worst possible thing you could have. Right?
Yeah.
But I mean, it's super rare. The problem with these pigs is they got the parasites so commonly.
Yeah.
It seems like every other one has it, and they're sharing it, and they're traveling in herds.
Yeah. Definitely.
Let me tell you my pig story because
please.
You're going to appreciate this. So when I went to college, I had a reputation as a hunter. I rarely even talked about it because it's not really socially acceptable to talk about hunting in college.
No.
But there was a few people that knew, and it kind of got out. And so I went to this university that was founded by the Domino's Pizza founder.
Oh wow.
He's a billionaire. And of course he used to own the Detroit Tigers baseball team, so cool. He's got all these security and all this other stuff. And he has a personal security guard who's this big giant guy, used to be in the military.
Uh-huh.
And, I can't remember if it was my senior year. Yeah, it must have been my senior year. I got a phone call from his security guard a couple weeks before college. And he says, look, we want you to fly down and hunt wild hogs with your bow and arrow. And we'll pay you for it, $50 a piece. This this billionaire, Tom Monahan. And apparently they were putting in sod for baseball diamonds.
Yep.
And these hogs were coming in overnight and just flipping all the sod with their tusks. So it was like thousands of dollars of damage every night. And they just kept. So they bought my plane ticket and got me down there early and he said, look, we don't want any guns near campus because this is right next to campus, right? In Florida. I mean, it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. The town is called Ave Maria, just like the university. Uh-huh. So it's kind of out in the swamps, but they were coming into the town. And so basically I shot 14 hogs and I got paid for them from this billionaire, and I even cooked them for him and everything. And he thought it was great. I made fajitas.
That's unreal.
But here's the crazy part. So I've also brought my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, Allison.
Yeah.
And one time, so college started. I just kept hunting. I kept shooting them, just because I could. It was fun.
Yeah.
Good weekend thing. Good evening. If I saw him, I'd go get my bow and quick drive out and shoot him. I had a motorcycle, so I'd just get on the motorcycle and shoot out there quick.
That's so good.
And I had Allison and I. We had shot one. And we were on a dirt road, not like gravel, but actual dirt, kind of in this development area.
Yep.
And it was the sun was just going down, and I was coming back to my car. And then we'd go back out with flashlights later to check the blood trail and pick it up and butcher it. Uh-huh. And all of a sudden, 9 police cars come roaring in with their lights on. And there's helicopters coming in with the big beams coming down, the spotlights. And, they just come roaring in on this dirt road, like dust everywhere, and they come circling around us, and they have the loudspeaker, and they go, drop your weapons now and get down on your hands and knees. And so I tell Allison, don't say anything, just do what they say, and I'll do all the talking.
Yeah.
Right? So they come up to us with guns on us.
Far out.
And one of them says, basically, if you move, I'm going to shoot you.
Yeah.
I mean, no uncertain terms. It's exactly what he said. He said, don't move a muscle or you're not going to see tomorrow. That's what he said.
Far out.
And he's got the gun. And, of course, they put handcuffs on us. And then I said, hey, look, everything's legal. I'm hunting hogs. And, by the way, in Florida, you don't need there's no season for hogs.
Yep.
There's no license that you need, and there's no limit.
Okay.
So you can basically just shoot them whenever you want, wherever as long as you have permission, right? So I said, look, I'm hunting hogs. I've got permission from the head of security. Here's his phone number. So they call him up. Of course, it's this long, drawn-out thing, but basically, it was all legit. But somebody had apparently called the police and said there was a sniper near campus with guns. Not just a gun, but guns, he said.
Yeah.
And then the chief of security, he said, look, Anthony, next time you go hunting, I want you to call the police headquarters and tell them you're going to go hunting.
Yeah, okay.
Right? Not the 911, not the emergency number, but just call. So the next day I was walking and I saw a police car pulled over to the side of the road just watching the campus. Uh-huh. And I walked over and said, hey, I was going to try and get the headquarters, like get the phone number for the police headquarters. When I go bow hunting out here, I wanted to call, and he goes, "Oh, you're the bow hunter." He's like, "Oh, I wasn't there, but I heard everybody talking about it. It was like a big deal."
Good.
They basically had SWAT team coming in from Miami and stuff looking for a sniper.
Fire out. How crazy, hey. We actually have a very similar story. I used to train a guy, and in Australia, he was in the army, and he was trying to get into like the equivalent of the SEALs, but for the army instead. So he was trying to get as high up as he could within the military service here. And so he went out, and he lived in Mackay at the time, which is kind of central Queensland, kind of like towards the top of Australia. And he went out and he used to do his pack marches, and he'd go on pack runs. So he'd chuck his bag on and just fill it up as much as he could with water bowls and bits and pieces, so it was as heavy as the pack would be. And this one time he decided to wear one of their air restricting masks. So it's a mask, like it's meant to be
I've seen them.
An altitude mask. But it just pretty much restricts the airflow from coming in. So he's gone out. He's put his Bane mask on, and he decided that he had to have a rifle to make it look as similar as possible or like feel as similar as possible as how it actually be. So he's got this cutout wooden rifle that he's put white tape all over to tape some lead to it to make it the actual weight that a rifle would be. And so he's out just doing these runs through the back of, it's like all sugarcane there. And so he's gone out just running through this sugarcane, and he's got to this one point, he's running down. He's like, "There's some sirens down there. What's going on?" And he realized that as he's trekking towards this line of sirens, that there's a whole heap of like special, the police as high up as they can be, the SWAT team essentially, which aren't called SWAT in Australia. I can't remember the name, but they came in, and they're in the sugarcane. They've come out like, drop your weapon. And it's just because someone saw him out running, and they're like, "There's a psychopath out running with a gun." Oh, it's pretty bizarre.
Yeah. People are jumpy, and that's the difference between here and Minnesota too, because when I was doing my PhD and my science research in Boston, you basically can't even say the word gun. You can't even talk to people about it on the streets or out in the bar, even like at a restaurant. But here in Minnesota, people talk about their guns all the time. Like, I was out shooting my AK-47 out in the backyard. My family, we have like a tradition at our house. We just shoot off the back porch in our, on our, backyard.
Yeah.
I mean, we have enough property and space to do that, but
have you just got targets set up off the back, or is it like just shoot that tree?
Yeah. It's elevated, so you can just shoot down towards the ground.
It's unreal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite bizarre. I'm in suburban Brisbane, so it's a pretty big city. It's one of the capital cities within Australia, and I'll stand out in my front lawn and shoot through to the back lawn. And we're reasonably new to this neighborhood, and I've definitely had some looks from neighbors like, "What are you doing? Is that allowed? Like, is that illegal?" I've got a few guys that walk past every once in a while, and they're like, "That looks like a lot of fun." I'm like, "It definitely is. You should try it."
Yeah. It's just a bow and arrow, obviously. It's not a gun.
Yeah, exactly right. And so, I mean, did you, with the paid system for the hogs, were you able to keep that going, or was it just for that first few, that 14 that you got paid for, and then from then on you just had access?
No, I mean, I got paid for all of them. In fact, what's funny is I was able to get permission from the university to so I would take the hide off and take the guts out, and they let me put the butchered hog in the walk-in freezer they had.
No way.
So I had like the whole university. There was all these people that were saying, "There's no way this guy's actually shooting hogs," right? And so there was like a never-ending stream of people going into the walk-in freezer to see these carcasses hanging up. And then somebody from the local area came by one time and said, "I heard you're shooting these hogs. Can I pay for it? Can I buy them? I like the hog. I like wild boar meat."
That's cool.
And I said, "Yeah, sure. What do you want for them?" And they said, "We'll give you $50." And so I was actually double dipping.
Yes. How good's that?
Yeah.
And so the ones that you were putting in the freezer, were you eating them, or was anyone eating them, or they were just there just to?
Also, I was eating those. Yeah, I was slowly butchering them and taking pieces, and we even did like a university luau where we we rented a smoker.
Yeah. What's your favorite hog recipe?
Gosh, honestly, I used to just bank on fajitas.
Yeah.
I like a lot of seasoning and things like that. But now, I mean, my wife is such a good cook. She would probably do some kind of a Cuban pulled pork.
Delicious.
That would probably be the go-to now. But like I say, back then I didn't even have a crock pot in college, right? I didn't have anything. So I was using the university stove and all this other stuff in the dorms.
With the fat on the hogs, do you keep that on, or does it go rotten eventually? Like the deer meat, the deer fat, for instance.
No, I keep it on. Yeah. In fact, even with the deer, so I used to have a hand grinder.
Yeah.
Like for the whole moose, I used to grind it all by hand, which is obnoxious thinking about it now.
Yeah.
But now my wife has one of these KitchenAid tools. It's like a big automatic mix. I actually buy an attachment that goes on for grinding.
That's cool.
And it's amazing. It's like an electric grinder, like a high-powered electric grinder. So you just put the meat in, it grinds it. So that's what I use now. And I'll actually use the deer fat as well.
Yeah.
I'll just throw the fat in there with the meat and make it as high fat as I can. And I've tested, burgers with deer fat and burgers without the deer fat just for taste difference. Because I've had people say, if you put a bunch of fat in there, it's going to taste gross.
Yeah.
But I you can't even taste the difference. It just cooks nicer when the fat is in there.
Yeah, okay. Does it depend on how long the fat's been there? Like, has it been frozen previously and you're still using it, or?
In the case of the hogs, probably, but no, I mean, when I butcher deer, I just take the guts out and I just butcher them right away. I don't do any aging.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of guys age the meat.
Yeah.
But I personally don't really notice any difference, so I'd rather just get it out. I mean, by far the most important thing is getting the guts out. Because I've had so many people that, especially when it's hot, right? It'll be like, I don't know what they quote, like 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's 37 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
I mean, just really hot temperatures in August, pronghorn hunting, which are they're like antelope, where they have these horns that curve in.
Yeah.
And I've shot pronghorn with my bow out in South Dakota, and other people have, and sometimes people will give me meat, and it tastes bad.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like, and people say it's gamey, right? Like, oh, it's just gamey. But in reality, it's just because they didn't get the guts out right away. So the guts leach this acid into the meat, and then the meat doesn't taste good.
So when you shoot a beast of any type, you're just trying to gut it as soon as possible?
Correct.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Because
especially antelope. Yeah. I mean, those animals, they're so sensitive. They're weak. They're not like deer. Like deer sometimes will run a good mile before they drop, if you push them.
Yeah.
If you just stay quiet and they'll bed down real quick and die. But, if you get up and run after them, they'll never find them. But the pronghorn, you can basically just get up and run after them because it's all prairie country and they're real weak animals. They'll just keel over after 20 yards or 100 yards.
Yeah.
So basically that's how you want to approach it, because, you want to get the guts out as quick as you can. You don't want to spend a lot of time driving it around or doing anything like that.
Yeah. And so once you've gutted them, are you keeping the hide on for a while, or are you just trying to get it butchered straight away?
Yeah, I get the hide off as quick as I can. Most of the butchering I do is out in the field. I just field butcher things. I even do the bones and everything because I'm not really stylish about it. I just basically take chunks of meat off. Yep. So when I have this giant Alaskan hiking backpack with a metal frame. And inside there I have 1 gallon Ziploc bags.
Yep.
All right. I've got a magic marker, like a permanent marker. And then I've got obviously knives, and then I have a sharpener, like a diamond sharpener.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to carry a bunch of knives, but it's a lot easier if you just carry 1 or 2 knives and then just sharpen them as you go along.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, I just mark which stuff comes from the front legs, which stuff comes from the back legs, because I like to grind to the front legs for the most part. So generally I just do the whole butchering process out in the field if it's a long ways away from the road.
How much is your pack weighing then as you're marching out, like with the steel frame plus the carcass?
It's pretty heavy. I mean, like with the moose, it was probably like 300 pounds, and I had to do multiple trips, right? Yeah. And I was keeling. Time? Well, yeah. I mean, I shot the moose at 10 in the morning.
Yeah.
In the mountains, and it took me till 5 a.m. the next day before I had all the meat out.
Wow.
And I had 3 different, aliquots of meat, like 3 different piles of meat. And I'd basically just put, carry 120 yards, go back, get the next one, bring it 20 meters, go get the next one, bring it 20 meters. And then just did that all the way down the mountain because you don't want to leave all of it back too far because there's bears and coyotes and things will come in. So I had my shotgun on my shoulder the whole time. So I had this just completely raw shoulder by the end of the night.
That's like 136 kilos for those listening. Like 315.
Oh, thanks.
315 is 140 kilos. So
yeah, I can squat about 300 something.
Yeah,
so that's what I was doing. I basically load the pack up, and I'd have to get down real low and just squat it up, and I could just barely get it up, and I'd be tipping and teetering around, just about falling over.
Far out. That's
yeah. It was, and then I had to teach the next day and the next morning, so I had to drive like 5 or 6 hours and then go and teach a class.
Far out.
So it was a pretty busy weekend.
So, I mean, to dive into your studies a little bit more and use your science side, I guess, what sort of benefits are we seeing in regards to meat when it's a wild-caught, free-range animal compared to, say, something you're buying from the store?
Oh, yeah, good question. They've done a study on these feedlot cows. I can't remember if I mentioned in any other podcasts. I probably didn't, but they did a study where they tested the blood of cows, and feedlot cows, they just feed them corn and they just load them up and try and get them real fat before they butcher them. Mm-hmm. I used to raise cows. So when I was homeschooling, my dad's bought some land, a farmer. I'm not from a farming family.
Okay.
But he bought some land. And I was like, Dad, can I buy some cows and raise them? And he's like, yeah, sure. Well, I don't care. Like, do whatever. Well. So I've actually raised cows. I had a bunch of cows, and just before you sell them, you usually feed them corn. So you start with like 10%, 20%, 50%. You kind of work up so they get fatter and fatter over the course of a couple of weeks. And then on these feedlots, they do the same thing. They feed them out with corn, and the corn, of course, has this atrazine chemical, which is estrogenic, which acts like estrogen in your body. And the studies with the feedlot cows, they show 700,000 nanograms per liter of atrazine in the cow blood. And just to give perspective, a man, just a normal human adult male, is about 20 nanograms per liter of atrazine. Of estrogen. Estrogen. We have about 20 estrogen, and these cows have 700,000.
It's absolutely ridiculous
of atrazine. So, yeah, so it's unbelievably, like, the health difference between wild animals and these feedlot cows. I think that's a valid reason alone to go hunting.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you talked about in Minnesota they'll chuck they have corn lots out over the place. They're not getting sprayed with atrazine, are they?
No, because they have weeds growing in them and things. They have it's a different. The ones that are farming for the fields, they don't have any weeds,
Yeah.
But the ones you're hunting in the snow and things, it's harder to see down the rows because the weeds are all overgrown in them. Yeah. Sometimes they're still eating the corn, and some of them get sprayed. Sometimes the deer, like if you're on private land, they're going into these local cornfields that are sprayed, but it's probably not nearly as bad as when they're just feeding them pure corn on these feedlots.
Yeah, definitely.
But it is an issue. It's an issue, right? Like I think the more remote you can go and the more, away from the agricultural stuff you can get to go hunting if you have a choice, that would be the preference for sure.
Yeah. Like, I mean, even so in Australia, they'll either grain feed or grass feed cows. I guess that's kind of a thing they do everywhere, but if you're eating a fully grass-fed cow, they have to state it on the packaging, and it has to be grass-finished or coconut finished. So what they'll do is they'll get the husk of the coconut and grind it into a powder, and it works. It works exactly the same as what the corn does essentially, but it's absolutely delicious compared to having the bad side effects of atrazine and whatever else that you can get from it, like the higher levels of omega-6s. And but it itself is really, really nice, and it's something that I definitely keep an eye out for. And all of our meat that we buy is always I always make sure that it's grass fed and grass finished, because if it's not, you're still getting the grain effect. And in Australia, they use atrazine on our grain, so it's something we have to be cautious of as well. Yeah.
And most people overlook all the inflammatory chemicals and things because these cows are inflamed, and they're eating all these grains. They're not really meant for that. And it's harder to measure that stuff, and you can do it in a research lab, but there's a lot of dysfunction and imbalance in those grain-fed cows.
Yeah, Yeah, definitely. And so going back to hunting, in regards to your setup, what is your, like, what does, I guess, does it change much between archery, like shooting, target shooting, compared to 3D hunting? Like your setup compared to your brother's setup, is there a big difference?
Oh yeah. Well, he's got multiple bows because he's so, he makes his own strings and all this stuff, Yeah, he's but he's got a bow press, so you can press you crank on this unit, and then it presses the limbs down.
Yeah, so you can change it over.
Yeah, but I mean, his hunting bow is pretty much the same. But his target bow, yeah, he's got this goofy stabilizer bar that goes way out, and then it's got this V shape. Yeah, it's got a V shape close to his body, and it's all shiny. And yeah, I mean, and his pins are completely different. So I mean, he's set up just for one range, one distance, and fine tuned on that one distance. But the biggest difference, right? I mean, he's got a hunting bow, and it's probably better than mine, right? I mean, I shoot Hoyt, so I'm a Hoyt guy.
Yeah.
And I mean, mine's not bad, right? But my brother's is like high end, and he can't get it back. When a deer comes in, there's a real issue with timing for him, because when those deer come, especially here, they're so jumpy and they're so visual. They're always looking for movement.
Yeah.
And you got to basically wait until their head is behind a tree and then get your bow back quick. And you have to be really aggressive with it. Like it might be 100 yards away, or at least 70 yards away, and that's the only opportunity you're going to have to get it back. You got to get it back, right? You can't wait until it's within shooting range and then try and haul it back. So that's, I think, the biggest difference and why he hasn't gotten one.
It's actually something I practice is I'll pull a shot back and try to hold it for a minute or so before I take the shot, just so you're kind of getting used to being in that state.
And
before
shoot
you
different positions, right? Like kneeling down, sitting.
Yeah.
Definitely have done that. And I mean, I think the best way to practice too is just to go hunting, like for rabbits or something small, like small game, that like when you're out in the field and you're tired, it seems to be the ultimate way to practice.
Yeah, definitely.
You know what? Do you guys have judo tips over there? You probably know. They're like these little arrow tips you screw on to the end of your arrow, but it's got these little spring-loaded wires that stick out.
Oh, yeah. So when you hit the grass, it shoots up.
It sticks up. Correct.
Yeah.
I don't know. Here in America, we call them judo, like Judo.
Yeah.
But they probably have a different name over there. But those are really valuable. I carry one at all times for in the field, because like if I travel, if I bump something, if I'm crashing through pine trees, moose hunting or something, and sometimes the sight pins might get loosened up or they might get moved, and I want to take that judo and just shoot at a leaf that I see or a plant or something, and just make sure my sights are on.
Yeah, because I had one in my old quiver. I used to carry it around just in case I ever came across some bunnies when I was out and about.
Yeah,
but
that too.
Now, the last lot that I shot, I just shot with my same setup for deer, and it worked really well.
It depends on how thick the country is and how much you're hiking and how far away you are.
Yeah. But I mean, that makes a lot of sense to carry something you can like take a quick shot at, just to see if it's actually still in range and whatever else, right? Like, make sure you're still accurate.
Yeah, the other thing I learned when I was moose hunting, the first moose I ever shot was a smaller bull. Mm-hmm. And it was quartering. It's quartering towards me a little bit.
Yep.
And I was shooting mechanical broadheads, so the kind that open up on impact.
Yep.
And it actually hit the moose, but instead of going in at the angle the arrow was traveling, it actually hit the hide, and then it like skittered in along the edge of the hide.
Uh-huh.
So it just stayed on the dermal layer. It stayed on the skin.
Yeah.
Like the arrow just veered courses and actually you could see the feathers sticking out, but I don't know how. It's hard to describe with like my hand motions.
No, yeah, I'm understanding. It's kind of just on.
It'd be like just sticking your hand in your shirt and just like running it down your shirt like the arrow, instead of actually penetrating. That's exactly what happened. And so ever since then, for real big game, I switched to fixed blade broadheads too.
Yeah. Okay.
Because that hide is so thick on that moose, and it turned out to be a fortunate thing, because the moose I ended up getting was 55 inches. It was huge.
Wow.
So I don't know how many centimeters that is for your audience or for you, but
I think it's about 110, 120 centimeters, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, it was giant. I mean, almost basically as wide as I could make my arms go is how big the antlers were spread.
Yeah. Did you keep them?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So how's it work in regards to like when you're hunting around the country, do you fly the meat back to yourself or how's that work?
I have, yeah. I usually drive if I'm going to go on a hunt.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it's too far, what I do is I freeze it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll usually have some friends in the area that I can put in their chest freezer or something in luggage.
Yeah.
And then I'll put it on the airplane, just do it nonstop and put it on the airplane and just hope it doesn't get lost somewhere and just be a bloody mess.
Have you ever been pulled up for that at all? They ever asking questions?
No, I've never had an issue. I mean, I seal it up really good, right? So even if it did thaw, it would just wreck it. It would probably ruin the meat, but it wouldn't at least bleed out of my luggage.
It's quite funny because a lot of Australian hunters will go over to the States because, it's obviously appealing with all the different animals you've got, but at the same time, like they don't get the reward of necessarily having the meat and getting to relive that. Yeah. Like, I mean, what happens, I think, is they just end up donating it to someone in need, which is really quite cool. Right.
Yeah, they have a huge network, especially here in Minnesota. If you shoot, because you can shoot unlimited deer in certain areas because they have too many. So and the funny thing is, you can only shoot one with your gun, and then unlimited with your bow. So it's just a completely different kind of hunting. If you're a bow hunter, it's such a better thing to do, right? Like it's so much more fun. You get the long season. It's more intense. You got to really pursue those animals. But they have these up here, especially in Minnesota, because you can go out and basically just shoot deer for other people for charity.
Yeah, okay. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's a good setup.
And so, I mean, something I've heard recently, and it might just be the podcast I'm listening to, I'm not sure, but a lot of the public land in Texas is being bought up, I believe.
Not surprised.
And so, like, when you go to Texas in a few weeks, is that public or private?
The one I'm hunting is private. It's a friend of mine who runs a podcast, and it's his family's land. But I mean, that's one of the issues here because some of the public land is state land. So Minnesota owns it, Florida owns it, Texas, and then some of it is federal. So the federal government owns it. Mm-hmm. And the problem with the states, when the state owns the land, sometimes they have financial problems and then they sell it off.
Yeah, okay.
Whereas the federal government, they don't usually have that issue because, they go into so much debt, they just don't seem to care. Like that's the least of their problem. It's not going to solve their debt, right? It's such a gigantic debt.
Yeah.
So that's one of the issues here. If the state owns the land, they tend to sell it off, and it becomes the exact problem. Uh-huh. And Texas is particularly unique because they allow fencing and all this, so they have these high fence areas.
Rigs up, yeah. And so for you, like obviously you've paid for guiding and stuff. Is that something you'd recommend? Like in particular for beginners, like is that something that you'd say, hey, I'd definitely be all about this, or are you more for getting out?
Only for certain. No, I'm actually more for getting out and learning, except for bears, right? Mm-hmm. Like certain species. I have done the hogs with the wild boar. I've done with dogs.
Yeah. Okay.
And I paid for that. But honestly, even that, it wasn't as much of a hunt as I thought, right? Like we drove around this giant swamp buggy. It looks like a monster truck. It's got these huge wheels that are as tall as me, like 6 foot tall wheels. And then you climb up this ladder and you get into this, and they have the dogs, and you just drive around until the dogs smell something, and then they all get out and just circle it, and you walk up and shoot it. It's basically like going to a farm and shooting an animal. It felt like.
Yeah, far out.
So, it was an experience, and it's fine. You're controlling the hog population, but in terms of the actual hunt, it wasn't really hunting.
Kind of takes away from the experience. I mean, some of the best hunts I've been on are the ones I'm unsuccessful at, to be honest. It's like, it's not often in life we get, everything we do gives us gratification straight away. Like you're scrolling through Facebook or Instagram or even checking emails, like that stuff's releasing dopamine when I was out hunting for 2-3 days straight, and I didn't see one animal that I could have even snuck up on. And it was really like soul destroying. But after that weekend, I was like, you know what? That was actually such a fun weekend. Like if you'd asked me at that point in time, am I having fun? I would have been like, fuck no. But a few days later, I was like, that was actually such a good weekend. It just like really refreshed me and made me feel awesome. So looking back, like that's it's not my favorite time, but it's definitely one of the favorite times I've had just hunting, just because of the reset that it kind of creates.
Right. Same here. I mean, and it's not for everybody, but I think it's a form of meditation, like learning that flow state and learning kind of to interact with the actual nature and how difficult it is to get food.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I find that even just shooting my bow daily, I'll get like if I get to shoot it daily, that's not always the way, but I mean, just when I'm practicing in the backyard, even I find it can be quite meditative because it makes everything else silenced and you just get to focus just on that what you're doing there.
Yeah, and I do like hunt in Minnesota. We do a lot of these. We call them party hunts. So for deer, for example, with the gun, oftentimes you just push through a wood. There'll be a lot of open area and then a strip of trees.
Yep.
Right. So what you do is you post a couple guys. They wear blaze orange and they stand on one end, and then you have 3 or 4 guys walk through the woods and they push all the deer out to the other side, and that's pretty fun. But and they call that party hunting. But another form of party hunting is just everybody goes and sits in a different spot or hunts a different region or something. And then in the evening you come back in the dark and the good thing is, like, for a case like yours where you didn't see anything for a day or two, somebody, at least you're always sitting out in the woods saying, well, I'm not seeing anything, but at least I know somebody else is, and I'm going to hear the cool story later.
Yeah, definitely.
Because there's always stories, right? Like no matter, even if you don't see anything, there's always something that happens and there's some story that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like, it's not the same, but my cousin's husband, he goes out rifle hunting the same place that I go bow hunting. And it's been quite interesting. We'll kind of meet up every few weeks and we'll have a little chat like, oh, where did you see the deer? Or where didn't you see the deer? And where have you been? And it's quite cool recently. I've been getting onto them a lot and he hasn't been seeing them at all. So selfishly, I'm like, please keep it that way so I get the next deer rather than you shooting and scaring them off.
One thing I learned with deer, and you can try this in Australia because it works wonders here in the United States for me all around. I've hunted in all different states, right?
Yeah.
And the deer, they have this habit, and these are whitetail deer. Mule deer are a little bit different, so maybe there's species differences, but if you push them, so obviously normally when you're hunting, you're walking into the wind. So you got the wind in your face.
Yeah. And
then you'll kick up a bunch of deer up ahead of you. They'll see you or something, and all of a sudden you look up and there's deer running away.
Yeah.
And what I like to do, and again, this is pretty predictable if you're a good sprinter, if you're healthy. I run after the deer, and so they know I'm actually pursuing them, and they kind of like, they can tell, right? Like you can kind of see them just jogging, like hopping along, and then all of a sudden they sprint, right?
Yeah.
They turn up, and what they'll do oftentimes is they'll actually run up a hill and over the hill, and then they'll circle around and try and get behind you and scent you, so they know where your wind. They try and because they don't trust their eyes as much as their nose.
Yeah.
So what I do is I'll run directly after them so they know I'm pursuing, and then I'll literally turn and run backwards and then cut around where, like literally where I think they're going to circle. And I can't tell you how many times I've actually cut the deer off where they'll sprint for a while and then they'll kind of sneak around and try and circle around on you.
That's unreal because I've been doing the opposite where I try to circle on them, but they're probably circling me.
Yeah, usually they cut back. It's amazing. And I learned this because I hunt in the snow a lot. And it's amazing. You wouldn't believe how many times when you're hunting in the snow, you kick up some deer, you're tracking them, and you'll notice that they circle a wide circle around, and then they're walking right in your footsteps for a while.
Yeah, okay.
And then they peel off and go somewhere else. But it's really frustrating because you'll find these fresh tracks. You'll be tracking the deer for hours, and then all of a sudden it'll circle around, and you'll realize it's walking right in your tracks.
That's absolutely bizarre. I'd love for any Australian listeners, if you've tried that on any of the Australian deer, that would be unreal to hear.
Yeah. Especially on the hills, it works particularly well when there's hills.
Yeah,
because they like to run over the back of the hill and then they circle around. That's what I've found.
And does it matter if it's does or stags, or it's just pretty much any deer?
No, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, one time I had a 10-point buck, which is 5 points on each side.
Yeah.
Sometimes in Montana they call that a 5x5 or a 5-pointer or something, but we call them 10-pointer. So anyways, I ran one up a hill and it circled around the hill, and I circled back on it and it almost ran me over. Wow. I was sprinting full blast, and I'm pretty fast, and that's part of the trick. You can't just walk back. You've got to sprint after the deer, turn around, sprint backwards, and then sprint a loop.
Yeah.
And then wait, and then stop really fast and just sit and wait. And sometimes it takes them 10 minutes. It takes them a little while because they'll make a pretty wide loop.
Yeah.
But
that's
but
incredible.
yeah, this buck, I was still sprinting back to try and circle around, and it was sprinting right down. All of a sudden, I came around this corner, sprinting right into me, just looked right in my face and just wheeled around and took off.
That's unreal. So when you run after them, how long are you with you sprinting after them? How close are you getting to the deer before they take off, and then how long are you chasing?
Not much at all. I only sprint them for a few steps just so they know I'm running after them.
Okay, so until you see them change to go faster, and then you run back.
Yeah, exactly. Usually you can tell when they know they're being pursued. You can just tell the way they suddenly take off.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they just kind of bound along, or they just there's a difference between a deer that's sprinting and then a deer that's just kind of loping, because they bounce when they lope. When they're not nervous, they just kind of bounce up and down.
Yeah.
Like if you're trying to shoot a running deer, it's easier to shoot a deer that's sprinting. I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying if you were, like a deer full sprinting a deer that's full sprinting is just straight, just a straight run. But when they're bounding, they're up and down, bouncing real high.
Yeah.
So you can tell because they'll go from bounding to sprinting when they know they're being pursued.
That's so interesting.
And then they really want to circle,
Yeah. That's really cool. There's some really good tips in there. That's great. Thank you.
Oh, it's fun. It's a great sport.
I've thoroughly enjoyed my time in it so far, even though it hasn't been long. But obviously starting a podcast in bits and pieces, it's kind of become quite the obsessive thing. And I mean, I think a good thing, a healthy thing to have your mind on rather than whatever else we probably could in this world.
Right. Well, hopefully you can come to the United States and hunt with me sometime. I'm going to be doing some hunting this fall with a bunch of guys. You could definitely come there, probably talk off the air about it. And then, it's too bad this hog hunt in Texas is coming up so quickly, or otherwise, you'd probably be invited on that one too. It's on my friend's land and I haven't talked to him about it and all this, but certainly next year we got to get you out. Then we can do a podcast on the hunt in the United States as you've done.
That'd be unreal. I'd love that. And likewise, if everyone come to Australia, that'd be incredible.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess to kind of send people your way a little bit more, like if they're ever interested in getting like a DNA analysis, or pretty much what you do with your consulting company is you'll get people's 23andMe, their write-up on their genetics, and you'll look at their genetics and say, hey, this is the things that you should be doing to optimally perform and optimally thrive. So, I mean, if people ever want to check you out, it's just ajconsulting.com.
Close, yeah. AJ Consulting Company. AJ Consulting Company. You have to put the crazy word company in. And this is because I made this website so long ago. I didn't really have a sense of search engine optimization, and I still don't. So, but AJ Consulting Company, yeah.
That's unreal. It was really cool to look on through your site and have a look. And you've actually got photos of you hunting up there. And your book, Generation, you talk about fishing a lot. And you said like you've got another book deal, and you're doing that based on hunting, which I think is awesome.
Right.
Bringing your life into the book life as well, which is cool.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that.
And I mean, if you're a reader, to the listeners, I'd strongly recommend the Estra Generation as well, because it's quite crazy to see how different things within the world are affecting your health, and it's day-to-day products that you've got in your house, as well as probably food you're eating quite regularly. So yeah, I'd strongly recommend that as well. But Dr. Anthony J, thank you so much, mate. It's been awesome.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. That's it. That's a wrap, guys. Thank you so much for joining us this week. If you have not already, please do hit subscribe. If you want to leave us a great little review, that would also be highly appreciated. However, follow along with our journey at becomingaBowhunter.podcast on Instagram and Facebook. You can also check out our website, which is www.becomingaBowhunter.com. And if you want to email me of any guests or any questions that you would like answered on the podcast, then you can get in touch with me via email at matty@becomingabowhunter.com. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Make sure you join us next week. Big love from us at Becoming a Bowhunter.